Be me, Mike, 34. Got a good job as a systems engineer. Life is stable. Married for 5 years to Debbie. We met in our late 20s. Things used to be simple. We'd spend weekends hiking or just watching movies. We talked about everything. Seemed like we were on the same page, building a life together. Bought a house in the suburbs a couple of years back, the whole 9 yards. But things have been different for the last year, maybe a bit longer. It started subtly. Debbie got a new job in social media marketing. Suddenly, her entire vocabulary changed. Everything was about vibes and energies and personal brands. Her phone became a permanent extension of her hand. Our quiet evenings turned into her scrolling endlessly while I talked to the side of her head. Then came Tiffany. Tiffany is Debbie's work friend, recently divorced, very, very loudly divorced. Her entire personality is now based on being a free-spirited, empowered woman who doesn't need a man. Which is fine, I guess. Her life, her choice. But she became this guru for Debbie, a life coach from hell. Every conversation I had with my wife started feeling like a negotiation with Tiffany's ghost. Debbie would parrot her opinions on everything. My hobbies were a sign of me avoiding emotional intimacy. My desire for a quiet night in was me stifling her social needs. My job was just part of the patriarchal machine. I tried to talk to her about it, gently. Told her it felt like Tiffany's opinions were becoming our household rules. That was a mistake, a huge one. She told me I was being threatened by a strong female friendship, said I was trying to isolate her. Classic sign of a controlling personality, apparently. I dropped it. What else could I do? Arguing just led to more buzzwords I didn't understand. I was projecting. I was invalidating her experience. I was not holding space for her truth. It was exhausting, like arguing with a pop psychology textbook. So, flash forward to a few months ago, a Wednesday, I think. I get home from work, long day, debugging a server migration. Brain is fried. All I want is a hot meal and some peace. The house is quiet, too quiet. There's a note on the kitchen counter. Dinner in the fridge. Tiffany is having a crisis. Be back late. D. Of course, another Tiffany crisis. The crisis usually involved a bad date, an argument with her ex, or her landlord complaining about her loud parties. I sighed, pulled out the Tupperware container of leftover spaghetti, nuke it in the microwave, eat it standing over the sink. Felt less like a husband and more like a roommate who pays most of the bills. I cleaned up, watched some TV, tinkered with a personal project in the garage. The hours ticked by. 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m. Finally, I hear her car pull into the driveway. She walks in, buzzing with energy, like she just mainlined 3 espressos. She doesn't ask about my day, doesn't even seem to notice my existence beyond being a figure in the room. She drops her purse on the floor and beams at me. Said she had the most amazing news. Tiffany, a true queen, had worked her magic. She'd managed to get them a VIP table at a club called Aura for Friday night. My stomach dropped. I know Aura. Everybody in our city knows Aura. It's not just a nightclub. It's a meat market. It's famous for attracting pro athletes, visiting businessmen, and the women who hunt them. Stories about that place are legendary, and not in a good way. I put down the remote control and looked at her. Tried to keep my voice as neutral as possible. I mentioned the club's name. Asked if she was sure that was the place. Her excitement didn't waver. She said yes, of course. It's the hottest spot in the city. It was going to be a girls' night, a real one. Just her, Tiffany, and a couple of their other friends. I took a breath, reminded her that we'd talked about that specific club before, that it didn't seem like her kind of place, our kind of place. That's when the smile on her face vanished. It was replaced by a look of weary disappointment, like I was a child who'd just failed a simple test. She said, "Oh, don't start." It was just a harmless night out with her friends. She deserved to have fun. She worked hard. They all worked hard. Tiffany especially needed this, what with everything she was going through. The divorce was tough. She needed to feel desirable again. I held up a hand, tried to steer the conversation back to the point, said it wasn't about her having fun. I wanted her to have fun. But the issue was the venue, the company. I reminded her of the last girls' night she'd had with Tiffany a month or two prior. It wasn't at a place like Aura, just a regular downtown bar. Even so, she had come home at 4 a.m. alone, in a cab I had to pay for remotely with my credit card because she'd lost her wallet and her phone was dead. She'd been a complete mess. Couldn't remember half the night. I told her I wasn't trying to be a jerk. I was just worried. That place brings out the worst in people. The change in her demeanor was instantaneous. The disappointment turned into cold, analytical anger. She informed me that I wasn't worried. I was being controlling. That my concern was just a mask for my own deep-seated insecurity. I was apparently terrified of her having a life outside of our marriage. I felt the conversation slipping away. It was happening again. My practical concerns were being diagnosed as a personality flaw. I tried to explain, calmly. My security or insecurity had nothing to do with it. This was about boundaries, about respect, about not putting yourself in a situation that could lead to trouble. I was her husband. We were a team. Teams look out for each other. She actually scoffed, told me I didn't get to define what a team was, that my definition sounded a lot like ownership. She started pacing the living room, gesturing with her hands. It was like watching a performance, a TED Talk on my failings. She said Tiffany had warned her this would happen, that as soon as she started reclaiming her independence, I would start to crack down. I was trying to dim her light because I was afraid she would outshine me. I just sat there on the couch watching this. It was surreal. This wasn't my wife. This was a stranger reading from a script. I asked her to stop, just for a second, to listen. I said, "I'm not forbidding you. I'm asking you, as your husband. I am uncomfortable with this, and I am asking you not to go to that specific place." Her eyes narrowed. She said my discomfort was my problem to deal with, not hers. It was my emotional labor to work through my own issues, not her job to shrink herself to fit into my comfort zone. Then she dropped the big one. "You're gaslighting me, Mike." I just stared at her. I didn't even know what to say. She saw my confusion and took it as an admission of guilt. She explained, in a condescending tone, that gaslighting was when someone tries to make you doubt your own perception of reality. My attempt to frame my control issues as reasonable concern was a textbook example. She'd read all about it. She finished her speech by declaring that she was going, and that was final. Said she refused to negotiate her freedom. And with that, she turned and marched into our bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I sat there in the silence for a long time. The TV was still on, muted. I felt this profound sense of defeat. Not anger, just a quiet, hollow sadness. The next 2 days were ice cold. We moved around each other in the house like ghosts. The air was thick with unspoken resentment. I tried to bridge the gap on Thursday morning. I made her coffee, just the way she likes it. Asked if we could talk about what happened, without the accusations. She took the coffee, said thank you, and then told me there was nothing to talk about. Her mind was made up. She then said that if I truly loved her, I would support her choices, even if I didn't understand them. It was another checkmate, another conversational trap. If I disagreed, it meant I didn't love her. Later that evening, she was on the couch, scrolling through her phone. I was trying to read a book. She suddenly let out a little laugh. Then she angled the phone screen towards me. It was an article. one of those cheap-looking lifestyle blogs. The headline was something like, "Is your partner secretly a narcissist? 10 red flags you can't ignore." She looked at me over the top of the screen, a little smirk on her face. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The message was crystal clear. I was the problem. I was the one who needed fixing. All my concerns, my worries, they were just symptoms of my flawed character. I didn't react. I just looked back down at my book, even though I couldn't focus on the words anymore. I texted my friend, Jeremy. He's my colleague, known him for years, solid guy. Told him a little bit about what was going on, kept it brief. The argument, the club, the new vocabulary. His reply came back instantly. "Dude, red flag parade. You know what this is." I did, but I didn't want to admit it to myself. Jeremy told me to just stand my ground, but don't fight. Let her do what she's going to do. Said, people like that always show their true colors. You just have to be patient. His advice calmed me down a little. He was right. There was no point in arguing anymore. I had made my position clear. The ball was in her court. Friday arrived. I worked from home that day. Debbie was at the office. The day was agonizingly slow. Every tick of the clock felt like a countdown. She came home around 6. She was in a surprisingly good mood, humming to herself. She didn't mention the club, didn't mention our fight. She talked about her day at work, a successful campaign she ran. It was a performance, an attempt to pretend everything was normal, to make me feel like I was the one being unreasonable, the one holding a grudge. I played along, kept my answers short and polite. Around 8 p.m., she disappeared into the bedroom. I could hear music start playing, the sounds of drawers opening and closing, hairspray. I knew what was happening. I stayed in the living room, staring at the blank TV screen. About an hour later, she emerged. The transformation was jarring. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before. It was black, short, and tight. Very tight. Her makeup was heavy. Smoky eyes, dark lipstick. Looked like she was preparing for a photo shoot. She had on a pair of heels that made her tower over her usual height. She looked like a completely different person, a stranger trying to play the part of my wife. She walked into the kitchen to grab her purse, avoiding eye contact with me. The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I finally broke the silence. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "So, you're really going?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement, the final confirmation. She stopped by the counter, her back still mostly to me. "Yes, I am," she said. Her voice was just as cold. She turned to face me. The look she gave me was a mixture of defiance and pity. "I'm going to have fun with my friends. I suggest you use this time alone to think about your behavior." That was it. The final twist of the knife. My reasonable boundary, my concern for her and our marriage, was twisted into a behavioral problem that I needed to solve. She didn't wait for a response. She turned, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, and walked out the front door. I heard the door close with a soft, final click. I sat there in the sudden, crushing silence of the house. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt nothing. A complete and total emptiness. It was the feeling of knowing something was over, truly and irrevocably over. I had set a boundary, a simple, respectful boundary. I had said, "Please do not do this thing that I believe will harm us." And she had looked me in the eye, diagnosed me with a personality disorder, and then deliberately, defiantly, walked right over that boundary. She hadn't just chosen to go to a club. She had chosen Tiffany. She had chosen the validation of her friends and strangers over the foundation of our marriage. I stood up and walked to the window. I watched as the headlights of her car backed out of the driveway and disappeared down the street. The house had never felt so empty, or so quiet. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that this was not something we could come back from. This wasn't an argument. It was a choice she had made. I pulled out my phone. I scrolled through our photos together. Hiking trips, holidays, our wedding. The woman in those pictures, the one smiling at me, seemed like a different person from the one who just walked out the door. I wondered when she had disappeared, when she had been replaced by this stranger who spoke in memes and therapy speak. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. The pretending, the walking on eggshells, the constant feeling of being judged and found wanting by my own wife. I sat back down on the couch. The silence wasn't painful anymore. It was just quiet. I waited. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for, but I had a feeling I wouldn't have to wait long. The night was still young. I must have sat on that couch for an hour, maybe more. Time felt weird. The house was dead quiet. I wasn't moping. I wasn't angry. It was more like a state of clinical observation. I felt detached, like I was watching a movie about someone else's life. The main character was a guy who just realized his marriage was a hollow shell. I decided I couldn't just sit there in the dark. I needed a distraction. I needed to talk to someone who spoke the same language as me. I called Jeremy. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey man, you okay?" His voice was a welcome dose of normalcy. I told him she'd gone, described the dress, the makeup, the parting shot about me needing to think about my behavior. I didn't even have to add any commentary. I just stated the facts. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Jeremy let out a heavy sigh. "I'm sorry, Mike. I'm really sorry." He didn't say, "I told you so." He wasn't that kind of friend. He just listened. We talked for a while. About work. About a new project he was starting. About a stupid movie we both wanted to see. Anything but the real subject. It helped. It grounded me. He said he was having a quiet night in too, working on some code. We were just two guys, hanging out on the phone on a Friday night. The call ended around 11:30 p.m. I felt a little better, a little more human. The numbness was starting to recede, replaced by a cold, hard sense of resolve. I knew what I had to do. I was just waiting for the final piece of the puzzle to fall into place, the catalyst, the undeniable proof that my gut feeling was right. I decided to get some stuff done. I cleaned the kitchen, took out the trash, organized the mail, mundane tasks, things that required focus. It was better than staring at the walls. It was around midnight when my phone buzzed. A text message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Then a second buzz. A picture message. I opened it. My blood ran cold. It was a photo, clearly taken inside a club. Dark, with neon lights flashing. It was Debbie. She was laughing, her head thrown back, and she was sitting on some guy's lap. Not just sitting. She was draped over him. Her arm was around his neck. The guy was older. Looked like he spent a lot of time at the gym and in a tanning bed. He had that smug, wealthy look. His hand was firmly planted on her leg, high up on her leg. They looked very, very comfortable with each other. A second picture came through. This one was a selfie. Tiffany was in it, making a duck face at the camera. In the background, Debbie and the same guy were now kissing. Not a peck. A full-blown, passionate kiss. My hands didn't even shake. I just stared at the screen. Jeremy was right. People always show you who they really are. The text that came with the photos was from Jeremy's number. "It's Jeremy. A guy from the marketing department is at Aura for a bachelor party. He recognized her and sent these to me. He asked if you guys had split up. Mike, man, I don't know what to say." I typed back a simple reply. "Thanks for letting me know." I didn't need to see any more. I didn't need any more confirmation. That was it. The point of no return. The final nail in the coffin of a 5-year marriage. I stood up from the kitchen table. I felt a strange sense of calm, a clarity I hadn't felt in months. All the confusion, the self-doubt, the feeling that I was the crazy one, it all evaporated. I wasn't controlling. I wasn't toxic. I wasn't insecure. I was right. I walked into our bedroom. Her side of the closet was a mess of clothes and shoes. I pulled out her 3 largest suitcases from the top shelf, and I started packing. I was methodical, efficient. I didn't throw things. I folded them, dresses, jeans, the ridiculous number of empowerment t-shirts she owned. I cleared out her drawers, her makeup vanity, the dozens of half-used bottles of lotion in the bathroom. Every item I packed felt like I was removing a piece of a life that was no longer mine. I was decluttering my future. It took me about an hour and a half. When I was done, her side of the room was completely bare. The bed was made. The surfaces were clear. It looked like a guest room, an anonymous hotel room. I dragged the 3 heavy suitcases into the living room and lined them up neatly by the front door. Then I went into my home office. I turned on my computer and printer. I searched online for my state's official legal forms. I found the one I was looking for: Petition for Dissolution of Marriage. I downloaded the PDF. I filled it out: name, address, date of marriage. When I got to the section for reason for dissolution, I paused for a second. Then I checked the box next to irreconcilable differences. It seemed so clean, so simple, so inadequate to describe the slow-motion train wreck of the past year. But it was enough. I printed 2 copies. I placed one on top of the suitcases. The other I left on my desk. I looked at the clock. It was almost 2:30 a.m. I made a pot of coffee. And then I sat down at the kitchen table to wait. I wasn't rehearsing speeches. I wasn't planning an argument. There was nothing left to say. The actions had spoken for themselves. At 3:15 a.m., I heard a car door slam outside. A few moments later, keys fumbled at the lock. The front door swung open, and she stumbled in. She was flushed, her hair was a mess, and she smelled faintly of cheap perfume and champagne. She kicked off her heels in the entryway and saw me sitting at the table. She tried for a breezy, carefree tone. "Oh, you're still up. You wouldn't believe the night we had. So crazy." She started to walk towards the kitchen, probably for a glass of water. Then she saw the suitcases. She stopped dead in her tracks, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What's this? Are you going somewhere?" I didn't say a word. I just picked up my phone from the table. I opened the picture gallery. I tapped on the second photo, the one of them kissing, and I slid the phone across the smooth surface of the table towards her. It stopped right in front of her. The screen glowed in the dim light of the room. She looked down. I watched her face. It was a fascinating thing to observe. The confusion melted into shock. The shock gave way to panic. Her skin went pale under the heavy makeup. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with desperation. "Mike, it's not what it looks like." The classic line, the first refuge of the guilty. We were just having fun. It was a joke. Tiffany was daring me. I held up a hand. My voice, when I finally spoke, was calm. It was frighteningly calm. "Don't." Just that one word. It cut through her frantic excuses like a razor. She fell silent. "Your things are packed," I said, gesturing to the suitcases. "I've called a car for you. It should be here in about 10 minutes. The reality of the situation finally seemed to hit her. The panic in her eyes turned to tears. "No, Mike, no, you can't do this." The tears started to flow, smearing her mascara down her cheeks. "Please, let's just talk about this. We can work it out." I just shook my head, slowly. "There's nothing to talk about, Debbie. You made your choice." That's when the tears turned to anger. The switch was instant. Her voice rose, becoming shrill. "My choice? You drove me to this. With your constant suspicion, your controlling behavior, you suffocated me. It was the last-ditch effort, the final attempt to shift the blame, to make this my fault. I didn't even flinch. Her words had no power over me anymore. "The car will be here soon," I repeated, my voice still level. I pointed to the piece of paper on top of the luggage. "That's a copy of the divorce petition. I'll be filing it on Monday morning. My lawyer will be in touch with yours." She stared at the paper, then back at me, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. "You're just going to throw 5 years away because of one stupid night?" I finally stood up. I walked over to the suitcases. I looked her right in the eye. "This isn't about one night, Debbie. This is about tonight being the one night you got caught. This is about a pattern of disrespect. It's about you valuing the opinions of your bitter, divorced friend over your own husband. It's about you using words like toxic and gaslighting to shut down any conversation you don't like. You wanted freedom? You wanted to be an empowered, independent woman? Congratulations, you've got it." Outside, a pair of headlights swept across the living room window. The car was here. Her face crumbled. The fight went out of her. She was just a woman in a party dress, her makeup ruined, standing in the ruins of her own making. "Please, Mike," she whispered. It was a genuine plea, but it was far, far too late. "Leave the key on the counter," I said. Then I turned my back on her, walked into my office, and shut the door. I didn't lock it. I didn't need to. The boundary was no longer physical. It was absolute. I heard her start to sob. I heard the front door open, the sound of her struggling to drag the heavy suitcases across the threshold. I heard the car door open and close. And then, the sound of an engine driving away. Silence. A deep, profound, and peaceful silence filled the house. I sat down in my office chair and stared out the window into the pre-dawn darkness. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. Free from the constant arguments, free from the psychological games, free from the feeling of being a villain in my own home. The sun started to rise a couple of hours later. I made myself another coffee and sat on my own front porch in my own quiet house. The road ahead was going to be complicated. Lawyers, paperwork, dividing assets. But for the first time in a very long time, it felt like my road. I was in control again. Not of her, of myself. And that was more than enough.